If you've ever wondered, why can't I stop at just one chip or one cookie? It's not your fault. It is not weak willpower. It's by design. There are teams of scientists, they are called food engineers, and craveability experts who are literally paid to hack your brain, your hormones, and your metabolism so you keep coming back for more. And today we're going to pull back the curtain on this, how they do it, why it matters, and how this engineered food environment is wrecking our health, our focus, and even our ability to just feel like ourselves. Welcome to the Anchor to Wellness Show. I am Dr. Kacey Wallace, and here we dismantle false fixes, we call out the broken systems keeping us sick, and rebuild resiliency from the inside out. In this episode, we're going to talk about how the science of food cravings is being used against you, and why understanding this is one of the most powerful steps you can take toward reclaiming your body, your brain, and your life. So, before we dive into the science and role of food engineers, I just want to share why I felt called to do this episode. Every single week, I sit across from people who are exhausted and frustrated with themselves because of food cravings. They'll tell me, I don't understand why I just can't stop. I know better, but I still find myself reaching for it. And underneath those words, what I really hear is shame. Shame that somehow they're weak, that they don't have enough willpower, that it's their fault. But let me be honest, I have felt it too. I've had those moments where you're staring at that empty bag or that last cookie and you're wondering, why couldn't I just say no? It can feel like an inner battle, like self-sabotage, and it's heartbreaking because I know so many people are carrying the weight in silence, beating themselves up instead of understanding what's really going on. Here's the truth. Yes, personal choices do matter. Yes, what we eat, how we move our bodies, it is important. But it's not honestly the whole story. We are up against an entire food industry that is deliberately working against us. This isn't just about calories in and calories out or a lack of discipline. This is about engineered foods that are designed to keep us craving and addicted and coming back for more. It's so gross. It drives me crazy. And that's why I wanted to record this episode, because I want you to know that if you've ever felt powerless against cravings, it's not just you. It's not just a lack of willpower. There's a system at play. And once you understand it, you can start to take your power back. So, what are food engineers in the first place? Before we get too much, there's this thing called a Bliss point and this marketing trickery. I want to start by naming one of the most insidious players in this whole system, and that is the food engineer. So what exactly is a food engineer? A food engineer, they are a scientist whose job is not simply to make food taste better, but to optimize every variable in the food experience so it reliably delivers what the brain craves. Their toolkit includes chemistry, how the molecules break down and bind and dissolve, and physics, the texture, the structure, how something fractures or melts in your mouth. Sensory science, how it smells, sounds, and the sight, the crunch, snack, crackle, pop, right? Shelf stability, packaging, cost constraints, and scalability. So a food engineer is balancing pleasure curves, manufacturing constraints, and consumer behavior to produce something that sells and hooks. In industry terms, many of these roles fall under food scientists and technologists, who in the U.S. are a recognized occupational category. To put this in scale, the U.S. food marketing sector employs over 1.6 million workers spread across 21,000 companies, generating about $1.9 trillion in sales annually. And that's a massive infrastructure. And within it lies the engineering departments that decide how your food behaves. It's not a fringe role. All this is central to the entire process. So what are craveability experts? If a food engineer is the architect, a craveability expert is the behavioral strategist. Their job is to turn tasty into can't put it down. And they dig into neuroscience, dopamine signaling, consumer behavior, and reward conditioning to design foods that override natural satiety, push emotional triggers, and create repeat purchasing loops. Craveability is not an afterthought. It's an objective baked into the product design from day one. These experts test dozens of formula variations, they run sensory panels, they measure the brain response, they track margin trade-offs, all in service of maximizing habit formation. So believe it or not, there is a tobacco connection, addiction science recycled. That's what I call that, right? Here's where things get kind of dark. It's so corrupt, it's hard to even think, right? Many of the same methods used once to engineer nicotine addiction have been repurposed for food. There are some internal documents and industry analyses that you'll find that tobacco companies invested heavily in behavioral science units in the mid-20th century. And when regulation and public awareness began to hammer these smoking rates, some of these same scientists and strategies were redeployed in the food corporations. For example, Philip Morris, who was a major tobacco producer, bought or partnered with major food businesses, leveraging internal research capacity to expand into hyper-palatable foods. There was also a study that found that foods sold during periods when tobacco companies owned the food brands, they were far more likely to be hyper-palatable, meaning that they were engineered to spike this reward, than very similar foods that were not under tobacco ownership. And there's a lot of animal and human research that highly processed foods like chips, sodas, pastries behave similarly to nicotine in terms of compulsion, consumption, mood alteration, and a strong urge response. So the narrative that we just have weak willpower gets shattered when you realize these cravings are structurally engineered by people whose career is to make you crave. So let's see why this matters. When I tell people this isn't willpower, it's design, I mean exactly this. Your cravings aren't accidents. They are engineered responses optimized in labs by people whose job is to bypass your brain's natural stop signals. You're not weak. You're up against a system built to overwhelm your biology, and the first step to getting your power back is to see that system clearly. So let's talk about this bliss point. This is one of the most important concepts in food engineering because it explains why we feel so powerless around certain foods. This bliss point is the perfectly calculated combination of sugar and salt and fat that maximizes pleasure per bite. Too little sugar and it tastes bland. Too much salt and it becomes overwhelming. But right in the middle, that's where your brain lights up. That's the bliss point. It's not a guess. It's not an accident. It's measured, tested, and refined in labs until scientists find the exact formula that makes you crave more. It's not just about taste, right? It's about how it feels in your mouth, right? Texture, even sound, the crunch of a chip, the way the chocolate melts on your tongue. Did you know even when you open a can of pop, that like thing that it makes, that is engineered, that sound. The balance between salty and sweet in a snack mix, all of those are engineered to hit that bliss point, to trigger your brain's reward system and deliver that little surge of dopamine that keeps you reaching back into the bag. Now, here's why this matters. That bliss point doesn't just make your food more fun. It hijacks your metabolism, your hormones, and your brain. Every time you eat a bliss point food, your sugar spikes, right? Your blood sugar spikes, and then it crashes. That constant up and down dysregulates insulin, your fat storage hormone. And the roller coaster also strains your cortisol rhythms because your body reads these constant surges and dips as instability, as stress. And over time, this cycle feeds what I call the metabolic mess, a spiral where cravings fuel crashes, crashes fuel fatigue, fatigue fuels more cravings, and meanwhile, your hormones, energy, and focus are all out of sync. So now you're not just battling your sweet tooth, you're battling a nervous system and hormone system that are completely out of rhythm. It's overwhelming and it's not all your fault because this is literally designed to be overwhelming. And let me take this moment to spend a little time about me personally. There is a certain particular food, I'm not going to say what it is, but it's a certain type of pretzel. And listen, I do my best to eat gluten-free most of the time and try to pay attention to my diet, but when these pretzels are in the house, forget it. I cannot stop. I'll eat way more than I want to. I don't feel good afterward, and I know they are engineered to hit my exact bliss point. They do it right. That perfect salty, crunchy, slightly sweet balance. It's like my brain is wired for them. And I know I'm not the only one. For some of you, it's cookies. For others, it's chips. For others, it's ice cream. Every taste palette has its own bliss point food, and the industry knows it. A 2024 study showed that distinct gut-brain pathways carry signals for fat and sugar. And when both pathways are activated at once, like when that fat plus sugar are combined, the dopamine release in the brain's reward circuits is significantly amplified. It's like a 1-2 punch to the brain's reward system. Even if the total calories consumed in sugar and fat stays the same, combining fats and sugars leads to significantly more dopamine release and ultimately overeating. This was done in mice, but this is what it showed. I'm assuming like we can put this to humans too, right? In another animal-human sweet and fatty snack model, habitual intake of high sugar, high fat snacks changes reward sensitivity. Over time, the brain's response to lower pleasure foods is blunted, reinforcing the drive toward the engineered foods. And more broadly, ultra-processed foods engineered at this bliss point are often compared to addictive substances because they trigger repeated compulsive consumption by spiking dopamine and overriding natural appetite regulation. So the bottom line is this: bliss point foods are designed to override your body's natural stop signals. And once that spiral gets going, blood sugar chaos, cortisol strain, hormone imbalance, brain fog, it's not just a snack anymore. It's a cycle that keeps you trapped in the metabolic mess. So let's talk about the role of science in food design. We've named food engineers, we've talked about craveability experts, and now let's pull back the curtain on how the food industry uses rigorous scientific methods, from sensory labs to neuroscience, to design, refine, and manipulate food so it hijacks our biology, okay? These companies aren't winging it. They run carefully controlled experiments, often involving sensory and consumer testing panels. They bring in groups of trained or semi-trained tasters who evaluate these flavors and textures and aroma and crunch, how it feels in the mouth, aftertaste, all those things. This data is quantified, it's statistically analyzed, and fed back into product iterations, okay? So make the product better, okay? Blind trials, there's lots of blind trials and randomized designs going on. These are variations of formulas. They're run side by side, and consumers don't know which is which, and preferences are tallied. This helps isolate which tweaks, a bit more salt, a tweak in fat ratio, improve liking, okay? Then there's temporal and longitudinal tracking. This is how preferences shift over time, how satiety changes, how repeated exposure changes liking. These help brands know not just what's initially liked, but what people keep liking. And honestly, the crazy thing is they are now developing foods that will bypass the whole GLP-1 thing. So even if you're on GLP-1s, they are creating foods to bypass what those are even doing. Like, this is a scientific process that they're using, okay? It's gross, right? So neuroscience and imaging is another way. Some of the largest companies now use brain scans like MRI, EEG, like functional MRI, right, to observe how our neural reward centers respond to these different formulations. Michael Moss writes this book. Some of the largest companies are now using brain scans to study how we react neurologically to certain foods, especially to sugar. And they've discovered that the brain lights up for sugar the same way it does for cocaine. Also, we look at multi-sensory integration. Again, it's not just the taste, but it's the sight and the smell and the packaging and the crunch sound and the texture. All the sensory inputs are optimized together. And as sensory science is evolving, it integrates psychology and physiology and all these behavioral sciences, okay? And then we look at statistics, regression models, and response surface methods and blah, 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 sciencey stuff to isolate which combination of variables produce the peak desirability. By combining these methods, the food industries can refine formulas over dozens or even hundreds of iterations of their sample until they hit that optimal crave, the maximum repeat. So let's talk about these techniques in the food labs that they're using. Okay, you'll find these specific techniques. One is flavor masking and enhancement. They're using compounds to cover undesirable things like bitterness or rancidness, or they're accenting muted desirable notes like sweetness or whatever, okay? They're using emulsifiers, stabilizers, fat replacers. This is giving foods the right melt, creaminess, the right suspension without falling apart. They're using things like the physical matrix, like air bubbles, fat crystal structure, all those so the bites break in precise ways. They're using texture engineering to decide how crispy, crunchy, chewy, or smooth something should be. That crunch, it's the force and the sound. It's that sensory pleasure. They couple it with aroma, right? The scent is half the flavor. Scientists layer in those volatile compounds that release at the right temperature, release slowly, or accent flavor transitions in the mouth. They gather all that data and they do it to optimization, okay? In many ways, the food industry is like drug development. Test small variants, see what shows the largest neural or behavioral effect, and scale what works. So in Michael Moss's book, it is called Salt, Sugar, Fat. He talks about how salt, sugar, and fat are not nutrients as much as they are being weaponized, basically. They're deployed. They keep us coming back for more and more. He also states in his book how food firms intentionally find and lock in their addictive formulas. Again, they may have salt, sugar, and fat on their side, but ultimately we do have the power to make choices. After all, we do decide what we buy and we decide how much to eat. And we want to make sure we're not buying those things. If it's creating this crazy bliss point in you, probably not the best thing to buy it, or at least not all the time. These excerpts, they validate our claims. This is not all conspiracy. It's documented. It's been investigated. So let's tie all this back to metabolism and hormones in our brain. This is not just how the food tastes better. This scientific engineering has direct damaging consequences because every sensory detail is optimized to override our satiety. Our body's metabolic signals get drowned out. Our insulin is challenged repeatedly. It just creates such a metabolic spiral because it also affects cortisol and our stress systems, which then again affects our cravings. And our brains start expecting these repeated hits. The reward centers recalibrate. They want more. Foods that were once just pleasurable become bland, and you need more engineered stimuli to feel that same satisfaction. This intensifies the spiral. You get caught in the loop where your body is reacting to what the food is doing to you. Even as you try to eat more mindfully, the deck is sometimes stacked against you. So when you see someone ranting, why can't I stop eating this? It's not always laziness. Yes, it is our decision, but it's also science and design and biology all working against us, okay? So let's talk more about why this matters for our health. It's not just the cravings. It's not just liking snacks too much. This is about our health on a global scale because this does affect everything beyond just our pantry, okay? It's showing up in obesity, diabetes, dementia, autoimmune disease, cancer, cardiovascular disease, all these things. And here's the thing, you don't have to be overweight for engineered food to be wrecking your health. I see people every day who aren't technically obese. Some are even thin, but their hormones are wrecked, their cortisol rhythms are shot, their gut is inflamed, and their brain feels foggy and disconnected because these foods don't just add calories. They're disrupting the entire communication system of the body. Again, what is happening with our metabolism? Those blood sugar spiking, then insulin resistance, and then we get weight gain and fatigue and inflammation, and then our cortisol's out of rhythm, which creates more issues. Our sex hormones get noisy and out of control, and our cycles shift, and then we start having more symptoms related to hormones. And then our brain health, right? We get all those spikes and inflammation create microglial changes in the brain, like neuronal changes, brain changes, faster aging of the memory, focus centers in the brain are affected. That's why we're seeing dementia at their terrifying rates that they're rising. And then our immune system gets affected. That inflammation that's triggered by engineered foods keeps the body in that low-grade, smoldering stress response that erodes resiliency over time. And then this just is perpetuating the entire cycle. All of this feeds directly into the sick care system. Notice I did not call it healthcare because what we have in America is not healthcare. It's management of sickness. It's pharmaceutical dependency, and that's no accident. There is a financial incentive for food companies to keep you addicted because you're a lifelong customer. And there is a financial incentive for big pharma to keep you on medications for blood pressure and cholesterol and diabetes and sleep and mood and more because that's trillions of dollars in profit. And who loses? We do. Our health, our energy, our ability to feel like ourselves and live the lives we were made to live. So when we talk about food cravings, it might sound small, but it's actually a root driver of the chronic disease crisis. And it is why I get so fired up about this, because it's not just about willpower. It's about a system designed to profit off your cravings, your confusion, and your decline. And until you start seeing it for what it is, it's easy to stay stuck in that shame spiral. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just stop? But because when you understand this truth, that the food industry is engineered to hijack you, you can start stepping into freedom, okay? So let's talk more about the psychology of this. We've talked about the science. We've talked about the bliss point, the way the food is engineered. But here's another layer, the psychology. Because cravings aren't just happening in your taste buds. They're wired into your habits, emotions, and even your environment. So here's how it works. When you're stressed and tired and overwhelmed, your brain is looking for a quick hit or relief, and Bliss Point foods deliver that relief in seconds. The dopamine spike feels good in the moment, so your brain learns, oh, stress cue, eat the engineered food, get the reward. That's the habit loop. And once it's reinforced over and over, it becomes automatic. And then marketing comes in and seals the deal. These foods aren't just on the shelf. They're on your phone. They're in your social feed. They're on TV. Every checkout line. They're packaged in bright colors with nostalgic cues designed to grab your attention and trigger the loop before you've ever had the craving. It's a 1-2 punch. The biology is engineered and the psychology is reinforced. That's why people feel stuck. You're not just battling your appetite. You're battling $1 billion marketing machine that know your triggers better than you do. And again, that is why I keep saying, you're not weak, you're up against design. The good news is, once you recognize the loop, once you name it, you can start to break it. But the first step is just knowing it's there. So at this point, you might be thinking, okay, if this system is this stacked against me, how do I stand a chance? And this is where I want to leave you with hope, because knowledge is power, right? Take back your power. Be empowered. That's been one of my big statements. Be empowered. And once you see the trap for what it is, you're no longer blind to it. You can start making choices that work for you instead of against you. So let's talk about ways you can begin to recognize and resist these cravings, okay? Resist these engineering cravings. Number one is start reading labels with new eyes, okay? If sugar or one of the 50 plus words they use to disguise sugar shows up in the first few ingredients, if you see natural flavor clusters, or if there is a multiple sweeteners stacked together, especially if it has high fructose corn syrup, chances are it's been designed to hit the bliss point. The more you can identify these traps, the easier it is to stop blaming yourself when you struggle with them. The next thing is to notice your cues. Ask yourself, when do I crave these foods the most? Is it the afternoon slump? Is it after a stressful call? Is it late at night? Awareness of this loop helps you pause before it runs on autopilot. Also, understanding why you're having these slumps is a big issue. You can go back to other podcasts because I've talked about these slumps, okay? Also, plan simple swaps. That's another strategy. This doesn't mean you have to overhaul your entire diet overnight. It means picking one engineered food you know is a trigger and replacing it with a pre-decided option that still satisfies. Protein plus fiber things are combos that work best because they stabilize your blood sugar. And don't go it alone. Just like the cravings were reinforced over time, breaking them takes time and structure, and that is where functional medicine and honestly a community can make a big difference. But here's the deeper layer. This isn't just about saying no to chips or cookies. Your biology has to be on your side. If your cortisol rhythms are out of balance, if your insulin is unstable, if your hormones are in chaos, those engineered foods will hit even harder. That is why I talk so much about the metabolic mess, because when your systems are out of sync, the cravings are louder, the crashes are harder, the loop is even more brutal to break. The good news is when you begin to reset your rhythms, calm cortisol, and restore hormone balance, you're not fighting cravings with willpower anymore. You're fighting with alignment. And when your metabolism and hormones and nervous system are steadier, those engineered foods lose a lot of their grip. So the takeaway is this: you are not broken. You are living in a food environment that was designed to exploit you. But when you pair awareness with rebuilding your own capacity, stabilizing your rhythms, and healing the metabolic mess, that's when cravings finally lose their power. So as we wrap this up today, I just want you to remember this. If you've ever struggled with food cravings, it's not because you're weak or broken. The truth is, the odds are stacked against you. We live in a food environment where entire teams of scientists are working to make sure you keep reaching for more. And when you layer that on top of the metabolic spiral these foods create, the blood sugar, the hormones, the brain fog, it can all feel overwhelming. But knowledge is power. The more you stay informed and aware, so the more you listen to my podcast, subscribe so you don't miss anything, the more you can recognize that these traps for what they are, okay? Recognize them for what they are. And when you start to restore your rhythms and rebuild your capacity, those foods do lose their grip. So here's my little challenge for you this week. Pick one food you eat regularly, read the label, and just notice. Notice what's in it, notice when you crave it most, and notice how you feel after you eat it. Awareness is the first step to change. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. If it resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe and leave a review, and please share it with a friend. That's how we grow, and it helps me keep doing this work and bringing you these conversations. And don't forget to check out the show notes for other resources and offerings we have made available for you. Until next time, remember, you're not broken, you're rebuilding, you're reclaiming resiliency, you are reclaiming the real you.